Welcome back to GY 250 Physical Geography Part 1 with your host, Dr. Stephen Sakalis. So Alabama is currently in a deep freeze and school's been out all week, and I don't want us to fall too far behind. Hopefully by this point everyone has gained access to their Mastering Geography resources and has started to dive into Chapter 1. To encourage you to do that, let me spend a few minutes here in this first video talking about what is geography and hopefully generating some excitement about it. The study of geography goes way back to the ancient days. Basically, anytime someone wanted to learn something about the earth itself, they were technically doing geography. We attribute its origins, though, to ancient Greece here in the Western world, where the term itself comes from ancient Greek. Geo, the prefix meaning the world, and graphy coming from graphia, meaning to write about or describe. Back then, the world was still pretty mysterious, much like today. The universe is very mysterious to us. We don't have any any real idea of what all it involves. We only being able to see as far as our solar system, and very weakly at that. So Earth, when it was a mystery, was very exciting to study, and people would write about it and describe it as they ventured around and traveled and traded with people from far-off lands. Today, though, a lot of that mystery has been solved, but there is still a lot of room for the discipline of geography. It's just that it's had to adapt through the years. Today, we have satellite images of the planet. This one in particular was taken approximately 1 million miles away from the Earth. You can see our beautiful blue disk from afar. But we know today that the world is definitely round. For a period of time, Europeans were confused and thought the world was flat and were afraid to set sail to the west for fear of sea monsters and falling off the face of the planet. But Christopher Columbus, as we know, in 1492 set sail across the ocean blue and thought he founded Indonesia and the East Indies, but it was actually in the Caribbean Sea. Another depiction of a sea monster and the edge of the earth. But if we go back before the Dark Ages, before the Renaissance, before the Dark Ages, and even before the Roman Empire, if you go back to the BCE days, before Common Era, 340 years BCE, Aristotle published a book on the heavens, and in it he described a round planet, a round spherical shaped planet. And they did not think their world was flat, because many of them sailed and had different techniques to figure that the world shape must be curved. And the picture I have here is another indication Aristotle discussed, that on a round planet looking up, we can see in the northern hemisphere the North Star. And depending on your latitude, that North Star is going to be in a fixed position in your sky. So in the middle latitudes, here closer to the equator than to the North Pole, this is where they would see their North Star in the sky every night. And throughout the night, as the world rotates, all the other stars swirl around that one fixed position. If you're at the North Pole, this North Star would be directly overhead. If you're near the equator, it is closer to the horizon, and you cannot see it in the southern hemisphere. But that was a good indicator, among several other things, that the world was round. About 100 years later, still in the BCE days, Eratosthenes actually calculated the circumference, the distance around the planet, with remarkable precision. It wasn't spot-on accurate. He still, again, was assuming that the world was a sphere, perfectly round, where we're actually flattened at the North and South Pole and bulge a bit at the equator, which messes up the geometrical calculations. But he made some observations of shadows on a time of the year where the sun was directly overhead in a city in Egypt, and there's a big well in town, and he noticed that the sun went directly down into the well and did not cast a shadow, where on the same day, northward in Greece and Rome, depending on where you were, they had a shadow that was cast where there was no shadow on that same day in Egypt. And doing a bit of basic mathematics, you can calculate the degree difference at about 7.5 degrees, and the known distance between the two cities, north and south of each other, was in the measurements of stadia at that time. Today, of course, we use kilometers and miles. But he took that and knew that all circles have 360 degrees, and was able to calculate, knowing that based on the shadow, these must be 7.5 degrees apart. Well, then how far would it be to go 360 degrees around the world? And again, he did so with pretty good accuracy. But that information was transferred into the Roman Empire as the ancient Greece started to crumble and collapse. And then what happens after the Roman Empire is they expanded too greatly, were attacked by various tribes on the outskirts, and also collapsed into ruin, which we refer to as the Dark Ages. During the Dark Ages, a lot of this information was lost and not recovered again until later with the Renaissance, or the rebirth of knowledge, and then the age of exploration. They had to rediscover a lot of this knowledge. Another image showing the calculations made by Eratosthenes. Okay, so roots in ancient Greece. One of the famous historians, but it was also a geographer, Herodotus, often referred to in history textbooks as well. He was around in 484 to 430 BCE and was pretty much a pioneer in history, recording events, and also along with that, recording the lay of the land, the geography of a place. We mentioned Aristotle, and of course, your host, Sakalis. As we move into the Roman days, a Greek geographer who worked in Rome composed the world's first geographic encyclopedia, massive 17-volume Geographica, and it's very cool. You can find PDFs of all this ancient stuff on the internet just with a quick Google search. I encourage you to check out some of these works by Aristotle, Herodotus, or Strabo. Really cool stuff with the world, what the Roman Empire knew about the world back then, all in the 17-volume Geographica. Geographers were celebrated through much of the history. It's always been a very important discipline, and today it's embarrassing how we've let it kind of struggle. Where in the United States, at least, a lot of folks don't even know where to locate the states, sometimes even the neighboring state for where they live, let alone all 50 of them, or other countries and capitals, which is what you're expected to know as a geographer. Of course, it goes much beyond that, but knowing the basics of the planet also serves a tremendous amount of importance and has value. Here's a classical painting by Jan Vermeer called The Geographer, again showing the importance of geography, 1668 to 1669. Other famous geographers here are two physical geographers. On the left we have Alexander von Humboldt, considered to be the father of physical geography, and in that day and age, the 17 into 1800s, if you were at all academic or scholarly, you tended to be more of a naturalist, which involved multiple disciplines. It wasn't until later where we started to really classify our disciplines into things like geography and biology and meteorology. But we credit him for being the first to do what we still continue today in the tradition of physical geography. The concepts we cover in this class have roots going back to the works of Alexander von Humboldt. On the right, Mary Somerville. Physical geography has traditionally been very male-driven, but we like to acknowledge also the women that played a tremendous role in the history of physical geography, and in today we're seeing the balance of genders in the discipline start to be more evenly dispersed. But Mary Somerville, she produced the very first textbook physical geography in the English language. A lot of it came from German. Famous geographers today. On the left we have Prince William and the Duchess Catherine Middleton, or Princess Kate. Tried to do some research online and got confused about her title, but they were both geographers. Mother Teresa on the right was a geographer. And Michael Jordan, also a geographer, most likely where he gets his mad basketball skills from.